My name is Dev Randhawa. I'm the CEO and founder of F3 Uranium. We are a junior exploration company completely focused on uranium in the Athabasca on the west side. We have $30 million in the bank, some great projects.
Dev, good to see you. Right, since we saw you in September in London at the WNA, a few things have been happening. Not least of all, you raised $20 million. Why now?
Well, it's the best time of the year always to raise money in September, October. That's when people can come back on holidays, utilities start to contract, and that's when WNA has their. That's the time people are most buoyant about. It's just like PDAC seems to have a peak and then drops after that.
Right, okay, but hasn't been a kind of good reaction in the market in terms of stock, not just yours, but others either. Are people kind of put off by that sort of lack of forward movement by uranium companies? What's going on?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, but I can only speak for ourselves. We're doing a financing with charity. That's been an issue. And a lot of the juniors are people are pre-selling because there's some ETS that are saying, come December, we don't want companies that are too small, we want 100. So you're seeing that combination. And for ourselves, we realize the JR zone has not grown like we all expected and a lot of analysts expected. So I think it's a combination of things. But the good news is obviously our new Tetra project.
Okay, this one. Okay, let's come back to JR. Okay, JR's not doing what people expected, and you haven't been finding big new lenses either. So people are going, well, are you done now? How do you show them you can still make discoveries?
Well, exactly. That's why I was talking about Tetra. I think the JR zone, it's a beautiful little pocket. It's got, a peak of 4.5 meters of 50% uranium. And it's along a very large conductor. It merges with, we call it the A1 conductor, it's a B1 conductor. And they're meeting, and all the signs are there, like the borons are off the chart. We had zero point 0.4 on the edges, but we haven't been able to find that blob of uranium. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but as most companies, we're limited with funds. And so because the Tetra Zone is so much bigger, potentially significantly larger than JR, we take the money we have, and we have to focus it on where we get the best bang for the money for our investors.
Which you're saying is more exploration. Okay, you've got the
Much
Tetra
more,
Zone. There's the fourth one.
Yeah.
I get it. Very clever. But okay, let's talk about Tetra then. Okay, because we need to understand whether it's going to be like another JR, maybe. Is going to deceive us somewhat in the sense that it may not deliver. How confident are you, based on the drilling so far, and I know you've got a new campaign going, how confident are you that the mineralization plunges northwest as indicated?
Well, I listened to my team, at some point you got to believe somebody. And I believe Sam and Ray when they say that, and or a couple of new young guys we've got on the team, they're super excited. They again say, not if, but when. But what our signs are is that, first of all, JR is 25 kilometers from Arrow and Triple R. This is only 12 kilometers away, just west of there. You can draw a straight line. Second, the other reason is mineralization. Where at JR, the most we found was 20. This is 60. So we know there's much more potential. And the news release came out about 2 weeks ago about we hit over 10 counts per second in our scintillometer. As you know, the scintillometer doesn't tell you exactly what you have, but if you go over 10,000 counts per second, you know you've got high grade. And we found chunks of it, and there's over 30 meters of mineralization. That's a 15-meter step out. That's how you build pounds. When you got an Arrow, Triple R, you start here, then you start to add these lens or shear structures. Then you keep going, or pearls on a necklace, whatever. So we just believe, simply based on the size of this project is covered by a mudstone, so previous people didn't see that there's uranium possibly there. But we've re-assayed an oil about a kilometer away that had 0.4. So we know the system is at least 1.2, 1.4 kilometers long. Now the question is to go after it in piecemeal. So we found it, stepped out 15 meters. We're going to keep doing this and see how much we can grow it. But that's the future of F3 is what we're doing in Tetra and finding more zones.
Okay, well, let's try and understand what it is that you've got. If you look at the kind of the long composite radioactive intervals, do they represent coherent mineralized horizons, or these kind of what we're used to hearing from you is stacked lenses, in which so how do you get after them and how do you understand that?
That's a great question. Probably a better answer by Sri or Sam. But from there's on our website, you can see the drills. Where we're putting it out. We're very meticulous when we put out a drill hole, where it's at, how it's angling, and etc. Um, and for the thing I would say is normally these are what controlled by graphitic conductors, but maybe for the first time we've seen they seemed a bit weak, but the shear zones seem to be maybe more controlling them, right? So um, that's where they're from Sam and Ray's perspective, they're controlled by they're more shear zone controlled than they were through graphitic conductors. The old saying, all uranium comes through graphitic conductors, but not all conductors are full of high grade uranium. So you got to focus on these conductors cross faults. And now we see these are maybe share zone control. We'll find out. It's only our second hole. Um, that's people say you missed a hole. Actually, you never miss a hole because you're able to do some biochemistry and look for these other like boron and things like that. If you can do that, there's a chance that you are in the right area. But the main thing you have to have is mineralization, and you got to be able to. And if it's not there, you're not going to have size. And so we have 60 meters of it, 3 times the size of JR, and certainly a little closer to what Arrow and Paladin are doing. That's right, next gen and then.
Yeah. So listen, okay, well, maybe get Sam on. We can talk about whatever he's been
Sure.
doing with regards to halo alteration, mapping, etc., and
Yeah.
Mason lithology, blah blah blah. Just talk about this kind of 15-meter step out. You said that was quite a that was the right thing to do. But what sort of guided the decision to step out 15 meters versus 200 meters? How do you go chasing this radioactivity that you're seeing?
Well, I think again we'll know this better over the next 2 3 weeks. But the original goal was 25. It altered and came back to 15. We may have to do sonic drilling again. This is hard ground. You start out. We were trying to do 25, but it altered came back to 15, which is fine. But now, as we speak, we're doing more step outs. Exactly what you just said. We're doing 25 more. Because like I said, nobody cared. The step out news release we made out last 2 weeks ago, nothing. The stock should have gone up 20, 30% because now it's showing it's not a one trick pony that it's ascending, but nobody's listening. So we're just using one rig every 10 days, 14 days. We're putting out a hole and methodically. Obviously, if we hit, that might change. But right now, exactly that 25, 50, 100, and we'll take shots. And usually they look based on the experience, they're trying to see the problem with uranium in the basin. Two things: you can't in Namibia. People are taking samples on the ground, and they can then go, okay, we got a shot. We got lakes. You ain't gonna take samples on the surface. This is all geophysics. Some people geologists call it black box. And so. We will know over the next few while whether, and they have their own systems of why they do it. That's something again, maybe a chat with Ray as to why they're going, but we are trying to go 25, 50, 75, 100 unless something changes in it. But, we want to find out if we've got a chance for 100 million pounds like everybody. So,
Well, that's what I mean, because you talked about a conductor of like 1.2 kilometers. It'll take a while if you're stepping out 15 meters each time. So, is it a case of you're going to kind of keep this tight hole spacing to start preliminary modeling, or do you think you'll get more and more aggressive as with the step outs going forward?
it really depends on the success of each hole. If we find that we got something at 25, 50, then we might take a shot out there and just go for a home run and see what happens. The problem is you got to be careful with that. As you've seen, I won't mention the company. People started thinking, "Oh, it's holes here. It's all." That's not uranium. If you look at our experience, again, this team has discovered the Waterbury, which sold to Dennis. So they discovered part of the key team with Ross to discover what triple R was. I just sold for $1 billion at Christmas about a year ago. So the same guys, you at least know that there's a good chance mineralization's there. We have 30 million in the bank, and you got two very smart guys and two other young guys have joined us. Um, they feel super confident. If I'm using their words, but you can't put that in a news release. But they're super confident based on the monomineralization, and if we've hit so far both holes. Who the heck? That's 2 for 2. That's good. So we're hopeful that this can grow into something very large. That's why, because you got 60 meters, we believe. And again, you got to be careful if you step way out there. In Namibia, you got a chance of saying, okay, their step outs are 50, 100, 200, just the nature of it, right? However, you just don't want to give that impression because um, we have learned some very painful lessons. Failure can teach you. When we did the first, you know, 4 or 5 camera holes we put into triple R, man, we came back later 5 meters from one of our misses, gave it a shot, boom, onto a billion. So it's like high grade. Think of it, a high grade uranium is like a vein gold system. It's here, it's gone. Here, it's gone. So you got to be careful with the language of, oh, we hit 50 meters away. It's all uranium. It doesn't work that way, but certainly good if you can fill in. Uh, when you're doing original, maiden resource, you literally have to have 5, 10, 15 meters. Otherwise, they don't count it. And then, especially another painful lesson was BHP, and sorry, Rio, that bought the Hathor project, thinking they had 60 million pounds. All they ever found indicated is the only thing that counts in the basin. You cannot start using these inferred. It's cost so many companies billions to figure that out. So you do need to step out short. You can't just swing out there. I got 100 million pounds. That's so we've been through it. We've made mistakes. Other companies made mistakes on these step outs. That's all.
I mean, like you've just gone and raised $20 million. So there's people that believe you can deliver what you say you can. So what was the promise to them in terms of how you allocate that capital, having sort of come off the back of like chasing additional lenses and not
Right.
kind of getting what you wanted?
Well, we raised it because we again, you learn through failing. Sometimes we raised five. Next thing you know, we had 4.5 months to raise more money. So we said, forget it. We could have raised 30. Um, your track record may not be a great indicator, but tells you capable of the potential of it. Um, and for us, we 15 million was flow through. It goes 3, 4, 4, 4, 4. So we'll have finish with Christmas here, do our three, come spring, get summer. So we have enough money for a year of drilling. Obviously, if we hit, we can raise more. But the thing is dilution. You can get a high delta with the charity. If it's a 20-cent stock, you can get 32 cents. Because of the way they do it, their back end can be as low as 18. And these investors, to them, this is an algorithm. This is the metric. I got it. I want my 10%. Get me the hell out. So they're very aggressive sellers sometimes. So you got to be careful about dilution. But we have enough money for a year of drilling. And more importantly, I think it relaxes the concept of having to go back to the market. Because as soon as the market know you need to raise money, you know, they're underwriters, they're not overwriters.
Okay, well, look, before we speak to Sam, I mean, just give me your thoughts about what's going on in the North American market. Because as you say, like, it's a down market as far as uranium juniors are concerned at the moment, but the noise is ramping up for sure. I think I last saw you in London. We had Microsoft in attendance at the WNA and others. What's the noise on the street?
Well, like the UK, the Americans, the governments are waking up and realizing that maybe China could win. If China wins the AI race, what's the implications economically? But in order for all these data centers to support, whether it's crypto or it's EV or more importantly, now AI, you need a ton of power. So you saw the deal since we've talked, since January was a deal between the US government, Cameco, and Westinghouse, which they control. And it went through the roof, the stock. It was like 105, 110. It shot up to 130. And when was the last a multi-billion dollar company jumped up 30% in one day? So that's a big sign that, when you hear the Metas, or it's Amazon, they all are in it. And Google, look at the numbers Google just did. They're up, the stock's up 77% this year. So I think the money's still sitting in those spaces. The problem is investors don't understand is that the reason of a big gap, why the big stocks will rise, because they're multi-billion dollars, the super large funds like BlackRock, they can employ 100 million in a week. Well, they can't put 100 million dollars into a junior company, right? So there's always that, like when investors have made their money in Cameco and et cetera, then they look for other opportunities. So I do see this trickle effect happening. But right now, people are worried, the job numbers are good and, with a shutdown. So I think that impacts Spot's discount or premium impacts them buying uranium. So, the best thing for investors to watch is Spot, see how it trades. As they come, you can tell as soon as it starts getting back to even, stocks start to rise. And so I think that's really its overall market as well. They're very frustrating. I mean, I look at some of these companies, they missed a hole, the stock fell 50%. Like that's such an overreaction. But listen, what's the rule of business in juniors? Be a contrarian or be a victim. This is the time between now and the end of tax loss selling. Investors need to step up, put their emotions aside, use their brains, and go, okay, these things. And then sure enough, how many stocks have we seen it? How many years in a row? Stocks fall December and they rise back in January because the pressure's off them. So it's a great time, investors, especially for junior uranium stocks, teams with track records. They should own them. I think it's easy picking.
Okay. Well, Dev, I'm going to speak to Sam now, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Sam, how are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm doing fine.
Good, good, good. Well, I just spoke with Dev, and he's volunteered you to get a little bit technical with us. Why don't we kind of start off with trying to understand what you've been chasing over at Tetra? Can you just talk about your geological model and maybe how that's evolving based on some of the more recent drill holes?
So when we discovered Tetra initially, it was kind of based loosely on geophysics, right? We had this vision of there might be something in this general area. And we had a rough idea sort of on the direction of what it might be. And that's what we started drilling on and made this discovery. But as we started drilling more holes into it, we kind of realized that it's not lining up very well with the conductor model and the geophysics, and that things are actually quite a bit rotated, right? So that's been the focus of this fall program. That's what we went in, this fall with the idea, the notion of let's figure out the actual orientation of this thing and kind of have the confidence that we can build on that for next year.
So, but what are the kind of specific kind of structural or lithological controls that you're now considering to help you with that kind of the ability to kind of predict the mineralization?
You're right. So that's always the difficult part. I mean, with geophysics, what we look for is contrasts and physical properties, right? So typically you have a rock type that's associated with your mineralization, and it'll be more resistive or more conductive, right? Or it'll have a different specific gravity, so it might be gravity high or low. What we see at Tetra is that the host rock that's hosting the mineralization is, in terms of physical properties, not different enough from the rocks around it that you can easily identify it from geophysics, right? So ultimately, it's kind of more of a drill story and using actual drilling information to sort of flesh out which way it's going.
So I think you completed a kind of ground EM survey. So how are you using the kind of EM survey and the kind of 3D inversions to, I guess, refine your kind of drill targeting?
So EM target or ground EM is kind of the classic way. What you look for in that is conductive structures, right? So these are faults that have sulfides and graphites in them, and that's your structures that you look for uranium mineralization along of. And that is because those structures have a conductivity contrast. So they're basically many orders of, there might be 10,000 times more conductive than the rocks around it. At Tetra Zone, it's not 10,000 to 1, it's maybe like 4 to 1, right? So what we see in conductors is not the traditional meaning of a conductor. We still see conductance, but the plate modeling, which is kind of how you end up with those lines that everyone sees on the maps, that's not really the appropriate methodology here at Tetra Zone because it's just not conductive enough. So we did do the 3D inversion of all the ground EM. And, again, what sort of the results that are coming out of that are, it's not something that we can easily show to the market because it's not these lines, right? It's more these blobs, basically.
Okay. So you're kind of prioritizing chasing these blobs, as it were. There's no specific anomaly / conductor geometry that you focus on.
There is conductance associated with this thing. The deposit Tetra Zone is a shear zone hosted and Athabasca related, right? It's very similar to any other uranium deposit that's basement hosted. It's just in this different unit, right, called the Clearwater domain, and we don't have graphite in there, so we don't have strong conductance. And what makes the fault slippery there, instead of graphitic rocks, is micaceous rocks. So these are like palladium minerals, like a muscovite and stuff like that. So those are the kind of mineralogies associated with the structure. But they're just very difficult to see in terms of physical properties.
So can you sort of explain the kind of process that kind of helps you interpret the kind of the structure, as it were, in terms of trying to work out the kind of dip, plunge, strike of these shears? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
So, I mean, initially when we made the discovery, it was based on geophysics, and that is because even though it's weakly conductive, like there's still areas in there that are a bit more conductive. So we were able to find it and find the structure. Once we found the structure, we kind of stepped out along both sides, and we had this assumption of the direction it should be. And then we were hitting way too low over here and too high over here. And then we thought there could be stacked shears, but it just turned out that the whole thing is twisted, right? So that the holes on the east end, we were just targeting them deeper than we were anticipating, right? So now we have a different model, and it's basically almost straight east-west. So it's a shear zone that's east-west. We have the mineralization is sitting in there. That shear zone is very steep, but the mineralization in there kind of plunges down to the west. So it's a bit deeper as you go to the west, and it kind of comes up towards the east.
So what happens? Because obviously the recent press release talks about a 15-meter step out. How much more work do you need to do, or at what point do you start getting more confidence and be able to kind of have larger step outs? Because at 15 meters step outs, it's going to take a while to kind of work your way along the strike, right?
Of course, and that 15-meter step out was actually intended to be a 30-meter step out, but we just had drill hole deviation, and we restarted a couple holes. But at some point, you gotta get a hole done, right? So because we were targeting a step out to the west, your drill hole usually deviates off to the right, so you kind of drift towards your previous drilling, which is why it kind of ended up being closer at 15 meters. But that 15-meter step out did kind of confirm that there's this plunge, east-west strike, and plunge to the west. And sort of now what we're doing after this last hole that's been released, we've actually rotated our azimuth of drilling, and we're drilling almost straight north and trying to hit the structure sort of perpendicular.
Okay. And I guess it's early, right? It's early in the drilling campaign. But again, I'm interested in the kind of the process, and I'm sure people listening in will be interested too. When you're going about chasing continuity, that's one thing. Chasing grade is another. So how do you kind of reconcile these sort of wider and anomalous radioactivity intervals versus these kind of narrower high grade intervals? And what does that do for you in terms of the process of chasing grade and continuity? I
mean, typically the grade comes with continuity. So in the vector of the strongest continuity, you usually have the highest grades associated with that, right? And all your mineralization is within the shear zone. The shear zone is a flat sheet. The mineralization is a plunging thing inside of that. So ultimately, what you do is you kind of follow up on your previous drilling, and you usually focus on the grade. So when you have a hit and you want to step out a long strike, you actually target sort of the spot with the highest grades in that hole as sort of your point to chase out from. And even if you have a wide lower grade interval, there's still always something that's highest in that, right? And it's especially easy with radioactivity, because you know right away where's your most radioactive spot. Okay, it's sort of in the center of this wider radioactive interval. That's the point we step out from.
So how are you kind of honing? Okay, accept that. So if we talk about the kind of the diagnostic for vectoring, I mean, I think Pathfinder elements, alteration minerals. What are you using to kind of hone in towards the kind of core of the system?
I think when you're at this stage, you know, and you look at the scale of all your data sets, your deposit is very small in terms of your geophysical footprint and all that, right? So once you're at the level of defining a deposit or its extent, you in the field you go mostly by counts per second
Right.
as a proxy for uranium grade.
But is that the best way to kind of assay? Well, you kind of got this kind of whole CPS headline versus assays, and you know, there's how consistent is the kind of scintillometer when you're talking about grades, and you know, how do you kind of calibrate CPS results to assay distributions? I mean, because I think people get a little bit confused by the different types of reporting going on.
Historically, looking back, if we look back 10, 15 years ago, we used to always report handheld scintillometer results from it was called the GR110. And that was a device that went up to 10,000 counts. It went up to 9,999, and anything over that we called off scale, right? And about 10, 15 years ago, everyone switched to a different unit. So now we use a spectrometer. It's sort of the same idea, but it has a higher threshold. It goes up to about 65,000 counts, right? So now 65,000 counts is what we call off scale. But about 10,000 counts on the hand scent is still considered high grade because that's very loosely about 1% grade. 10,000 counts, maybe a little bit lower in some cases, is about 1%.
Okay.
And you can correlate those fairly well. When we release, so what we release is handheld scintillometer results over half meters, and that's the same half meter that gets sent to the lab. So we tell you this is the max counts in this half meter. That same half meter goes to the lab, and then you have a grade. You can kind of compare the two. I think that the grade to counts, it holds up pretty good, especially once you get over sort of the very low numbers. Like if you have, say, 500-600 counts, it could be 50 ppm or it could be 500. But once you get sort of in the 1,000 count to 50,000 count range, it's fairly linear.
Right. And how, you're just basically following, I guess, universal protocols with all of this, and same with your QC routines, no doubt, in terms of that kind of assay quality versus CPS readings. Mm-hmm. Yeah, standard issue.
Yeah, it's pretty standard, and it's the same thing that we've done.
Okay.
We've done for a long time, but the other thing we do is we gamma probe the hole, and that's been the latest. What we've seen other people release is the gamma probe results, right? And that's something you can do typically when you have poor core recovery.
Right.
So if you're drilling your mineralization, and now there's in a 3-meter run, there's only 1 meter of core in the box and it's radioactive, right? What about the other 2 meters? So that's when you actually probe the entire borehole with a gamma probe, and it kind of gives you a profile inside the hole, right? Which correlates usually quite well to the drill core, but they are kind of two separate things, and that way you do get quite a bit higher readings that way.
Okay, so understood, and I appreciate kind of running through that. If I'm looking at the press release from November 10th, okay, so it's a little bit old now, and I'm sure you've been doing other work, but how do I interpret that? 2.3 meters at 10,000 CPS within 29 meters or so radioactivity. I'm not quite sure how to read it. Look, I guess it's early days, but what do you do with that data? How does that inform what you're going to be doing in terms of the rest of the drill program, and what is it that you hope to be able to come back to the market with?
So when I look at that drill hole, what we see is a decent interval, and you have some high grade in there, right? This at the 2.3 meters of greater than, they're over 10,000 counts. I can't remember what the highest was, about 20 or 30,000 counts. And I mean, you can kind of compare those to hole 205 that we released assays for, and you can make your own comparison tables of the average SIN counts to grade. But I would certainly say that the 2.3 meters will be well over 1%, right? So in terms of stepping out, if you look at that kind of thing, you look at that high grade, the interval containing those 2.3 meters, and that's kind of your vector for stepping out, right? In our case, it's a plunge direction that kind of goes to the east. It goes up dip towards the unconformity, and to the west it kind of goes down deeper. So 205 is kind of on the east end, and then this last hole we released is on the west end. And obviously you want to grow it both ways.
Okay. So 2026, what are we looking at? Dev tells me you've got enough money to get after this. Have you made your plans yet? Have you given guidance to the market?
Yeah, so I mean, we raised 15 million flow through here, right? And the idea was that we would spend about 3 this fall and use that $3 million to understand the geometry of the deposit. I think we're at that point now. So that leaves us with about 12 million for 2026. And right now the idea is sort of to break that up into 3 $4 million chunks, right? So kind of like winter till breakup, and then something after breakup into early summer, and then something summer into early fall. So just kind of stretch that money throughout 2026, and hopefully delineate something really nice in there.
Sam, I appreciate your time today, and we will see you in the new year when you've got a few more assays. Thank you.
Thank you.